I would say there are incidents that actually come from my life. There are also incidents that come from other people's lives. But if you mean the kind of horror growing out of normal life, that's kind of my favorite type of fiction, I suppose. Rather than imagining a complete other world, or having really extreme events like, I don't know, a plague of rabid rabbits or something, overrunning the country. Or, there's many ways you can write horror, but I sort of like things that start quietly and in ordinary situations, so you don't feel, there's no reason to feel upset or nervous. But out of whether it's in a family relationship or, your own house turning against you or your own mind turning against you, where you start wondering, do you really know what's going on? That's one of the scariest things I've always thought. Well, for a long time, I would have said it would be male-female relationships. I find maybe I'm not doing that so much now, but it often is either family relationships. It's relationships, the book I'm writing now, part of it is about a friendship between two women, and it's not, it's not sexual, and but it's actually about friendship and being concerned for each other. One of the things in my death was the fact that Helen Ralston had been seen as, she was a model for an artist who was famous. And he also wrote stories for her, inspired by her, and then novels about her. But she was, one of the kind of point of the narrator seeking her out was to say, but you were a writer as well. And how can you be forgotten? Or how can you only be seen as the image created by a man? So, and of course, Robert Graves was a poet who was very interested. He really bought into the whole idea of the muse. He always felt he could only write poetry when he was inspired by a woman. So I also wondered, if it's a man with a female muse, then does the woman have to have a man for her muse? And how many men would put up with that? And so it was, I even dedicated one short story collection just to the muse. And at that time, I think I was single, and I was sort of thinking, well, about various men in my life. And it was just kind of amused me. It was like a little private joke. There weren't as many women writing horror. That's absolutely the case. And when a book came out, there was a book, Primeval, that an editor, Douglas Winter, put together to try and prove horror was not just a genre. He wanted to say horror is found in all literature. I totally agree with that. So he named various people. There was only one woman that he even mentioned as an example. Do you want to guess who that woman was? You'd think it might have been someone like Mary Shelley, who wrote Frankenstein, or it might have been Edith Wharton, who wrote some of the great ghost stories of the late 19th, early 20th century. Or it could have been Anne Rice, who was writing vampire novels at the time, or Tanith Lee, who could have written a short story for it if he'd asked her. I don't know. I doubt he did. But no, the one person he mentioned that was a woman, and I wonder if he even knew if it was a woman, because he said it was V.C. Andrews, who was actually Victoria Andrews, but she was a very best-selling writer. And even after she died, other people were writing under that name. So anyway, this annoyed me so much. I was even sent the book in a proof copy because I was invited to review it. So I kept myself very cool about that. I didn't go into that because I thought, that'll just be seen as feminist shrillness, making a big fuss over something very little. But what I did do was I then thought, I'm going to put together a collection of horror stories only by women writers. I will invite various people. And the only thing was, what I really wanted to do was have a big publishing company do it and not mention that it was women only. However, it was the women's press who responded to my interest. So, of course, automatically, the women's press only published work by women back in the 80s and 90s. So that was called The Skin of the Soul. And that came from, I couldn't think what to call it. And it was actually one of the writers, R.M. Lemming, was seen as a serious literary writer. I asked them all to write a little something about why they'd written their story or their feelings about horror fiction, whatever they wanted really, but just something focusing on that idea. And she said something about it being the skin of the soul. You're revealing something of yourself in that. And I thought, yeah, those are the most effective horror stories, when it's not just a monster. You're actually revealing something about the human heart and soul and mind. Yeah, all the big names in the novels, and the best-selling novels, were certainly men, except for Anne Rice. And she was sort of seen to one side of horror. It was like, oh, no, but she writes fantastic, historical, sexual vampire books. It's got horror in it, yeah. But, she wasn't seen to like Stephen King or James Herbert being the Rats or something like that. So, and there was the thing that in the 80s, quite a lot of times, except with a few exceptions, like Stephen King was a big bestseller, and Peter Straub was a very serious writer. It was a lot of times it was seen as that's really kind of trash. People are just writing these stories, these novels quickly, and we put them out with these most ghastly covers you can think of, and sell them. So women were kind of squeezed out of that in a way. I mean, you could get published, but you had to kind of fit either a certain type for novels. I did write a horror novel that was published. It's called Familiar Spirit, and strange enough, I've heard from someone recently there's no backing, but he would just love to make a movie out of it. And he also said to me, he just felt I had been underrated at the time, and that it's only now finding its audience, because it was reprinted by Valancourt in the U.S. I don't know. It's perfectly true at the time. Everybody was very dismissive of it. It's just another one of those, low-budget horror kind of paperbacks. My dad actually is under option. I think it's either September or November when the first 18 months expires, but they can automatically extend it. So I will wait and see what they do, if they do decide to do it. I've had short stories made into TV episodes in anthology series, but again, that was quite a while ago. There is also a young Scottish writer-director. He's just made his first film. It's not out yet, but Sam Raimi sort of took him on, was the producer. So, but the film's not finished. It's not yet been released. I think he's very talented, and I think if this first film does anything, they may well say to him, yeah, what do you want to do next? And I know what he's going to say, or at least I do believe him when he says, this is what I want to do next. And it was one of my short stories that he could see as a feature film. And I had this meeting with him, and he was like, yeah, that'd be a great movie. So we'll see.